Okay.
Oh, there we
Hello,
go.
everybody. How are we doing?
Good.
Good. Thank you.
That's good. That's good.
It's a lot when you don't get on right away because we talk about you.
Good, good. Or
Of course, you want me to say anything else?
then just again, as I said, tell me when you finish talking about me, and
We can get
I'll
back
get off.
on.
All right, I'll get off, and you tell me when you're finished. My concern is there's so much good to say about me that I'll never be able to get back on.
That is a
Live with
problem. That
yourself.
is a problem. We
All
talk
right,
about
okay.
that too.
You have one old participant and one new participant.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Hello.
Noah.
He's used to little ones. He's got a
With
Hi,
a
lot.
big
Noah.
smile.
You're such a good baby.
Oh wow, really? Well, what a smile.
Well, all of
Wow.
yours too. He has enough in his home, so he knows good about
He
babies.
knows
Yeah,
babies.
yeah,
He's an
yes,
expert.
Definitely.
yes. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem,
Baruch
Baruch
Hashem.
Hashem. Yes, I'm sure at the hell you understand the expression. They say the weeks, the months, the years, they go flying by, but the
Wow.
days are very long.
That, and this is so true.
And then you look back for those of us who have grown ones and we say, where did
Can't
that
remember.
go? Right. How did it happen? Where did I
Yeah.
come from now?
My mother used to always have. I share this a whole bunch of times. Prominently on the refrigerator magnet that says, "When they're little, they're so cute, you just want to eat them up." It says, and then they become teenagers, and you wish you had.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So all things considered, anyways. But she made sure that was there into our teenage years, and we saw that, and we acknowledged the truth of it on a regular basis. But either way, all right.
You actually have a teenager.
I
Yeah.
now have I have two. I soon to have three.
Well,
Eesh, we're getting old. We're getting old.
mental
Wow.
is really
Listen, I'll tell all of you what it's like to get old. I'll so that you are all
Please,
informed.
because
So
we
when you
don't
get
know.
there, so when you get there, you'll know that I was correct. Anyway, okay. Parshat Chukat. There is so much in this parsha. We were talking about the fact that in a very real way, this book, the book of Bamidbar, really to a certain degree is very much the impetus as to why the Torah chose to focus the eternal instruction manual of life, as it were, which is what the Torah is. It is the most important collection of information for all people at all times in all ages. It is nothing short of that. The whole world recognizes it, and that is why the whole world just calls it the book, right? That's what Bible means, the book, because quite literally, again, the most important collection of information for all people in all generations at all time. And yet, it is a remarkable thing that this perfect word of God, this thing called the Torah, the Bible, chooses to really spend all of its time in a very specific period in history. Again, we pointed out, really to drive this point home, how the first book and a half of the Torah covers how many years? Anybody know? We actually have it. I can tell you down to the exact amounts. Trivia. And if you know this, you get to graduate from Hebrews.
Oh, well.
2,000?
we're past that.
3,000?
Well, Tahel's got the big number correct. Yes, 2,448. 2,448. Why? Because that's the year the Jewish people left Egypt. So the Torah starts obviously with year one, or we could even say year zero. And the truth is, you can even say preceding year 0, which actually makes gives the lie to what I just finished saying, that the first book and a half Torah of the Torah covers 2,448 years. Because if you really want to be exact, you really want to be that kind of person. We all know those kind of people that say that really, it's actually covers an infinite amount of years, because there's the reference to the way the world, to what existed prior to the creation of the world, when time didn't even exist. So if you wanted to be that person, I would not be able to disagree with you if
I
you
think
said
Paul is the one that would do that.
Yeah.
that.
But not with the nasal voice.
No, right, exactly. Paul would do it with so much more class, but probably, but yes, but because it would be scholarly and it would be correct. So having said that, if we're counting for the point we're trying to make over here is 2,448 years, nearly exact, because again, as we said, we know the Hebrew year that the Jewish people left Egypt. So 2,448 years. So in the span of a book and a half of the Torah, we cover 2,448. Now that leaves how many books of the Torah? And if you get this answer right, then you get to graduate kindergarten.
Paula, graduate kindergarten.
Very good, Carrie. I saw that, even though it was whispered, but 3.5. Yes, 3.5. Correct. 3.5 books, which, by the way, and if you get this correct, you get to graduate, I think, 3rd grade, is 3 times the amount of material as 1.5 books, right?
Mhm.
No,
So
I'm wrong. So I don't get to graduate. Almost 3.5. 4.5 had it been 4.5 books, it would have been 3 times. But 2.5 times. Okay, let's put it somewhere in around there. 2.33 amount of time. Okay. But basically a significant majority of the amount of Torah is left on the other end of this 1.5 books, spanning how many years? If 1.5 books covers 2,448 years, you would assume that the rest of the Torah would therefore span somewhere over 5,000 years, close to maybe 6,000 years, right? If we're kind of extrapolating the math here. A grand total, as Paula is on the money, a grand total by the end of the Torah, where are we holding? We started this halfway through the book of Exodus, we're at the year 2,448. By the time we're at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, what is the Hebrew year? 2,488. 3.5 books span a grand total of 40 years. So the first book and a half spans 2,448 years with some incredibly important stories, including Genesis, including the story of Noah and the flood, including Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, including Yosef and the 12 tribes, etc. All that is packed into the book and a half, and we span 2,500 years. And the final 3.5 books span a grand total of 40 years. So you could right there, you can see that very clearly the Torah truly focuses in on one particular period in history, and that particular period in history is a strange one to be the kind of primary focus of the Torah, because the Jewish people are in a very weird state at that point. They're not in Egypt, not in Israel. In fact, day one of them being in Israel happens past the Torah, happens in the first chapter of the book of Joshua, which means they're on the threshold of entering in the land of Israel, which was which was to a certain degree the great aspiration, the great goal, right, of this journey of, in fact, the whole thing. From the moment God tells Abraham, you're the man and your children will be the people, right? What's he say to him? They will return back to this land. This is the land that I will give you, etc., etc. And all of that that great moment, that great arriving at the land of Israel, is not in the Torah. So the Torah does not share with us even one day of the Jewish people arriving, not even an epilogue, right? I'm a sucker for epilogues. I read a good book, whatever it is. I love hearing that closure, getting that closure, the past the happily ever after. Tell me a little bit about that happily ever after. I'm a sucker for just, some good, let me go to sleep at night feeling pretty good, whatever it is. I love that. Yeah, no epilogue. It's actually interesting because on Simchat Torah, you do get a little bit of that epilogue. You finish reading the Torah, right? And you start again from Bereshit. But the Haftorah is actually the first chapter of Joshua. Okay, so you get a little bit of what happens after this. Yeah. But the Torah itself is not about the land of Israel. The Torah itself is about 40 years where the Jewish people are in this transitional state, right? In the desert, without a temple, without the ability to perform more than half of the mitzvot. There's no king, there's no prophet governance, etc. And yet this is the period that becomes the primary focus of God's epic book of everything, right? And so we talked about this, and what we talked about is because this was the story or the lessons associated with the first generation of the Jewish people learning what it means to be the Jewish people. That's what this is. Their entire period in the desert was a training exercise before they arrived in the land of Israel and went prime time, right? And had their grand opening, as it were. And we know that it went with fits and starts, right? The soft open is a little rough, usually. That's the point of it, right? The soft open is like, oh, God, we better get that fixed before we have the grand opening, right? And it did. But it achieved exactly what the soft opening was meant to achieve. And to a certain degree, the soft opening is meant to be incredibly instructional, right? To learn, to stress test the system, to learn from the mistakes, see what we're going to do a little too much, how we're going to compensate, how we're going to overcompensate, all these kind of things, right? So the bottom line is that in terms of instruction, the soft open is perhaps far more important than the grand opening. Grand opening is get to work, right? Now that you had all the instructions, now yalla, right? So the Torah very deliberately picks this period where the Jewish people are figuring it out. Now, again, most people are quite cynical of this generation, right? Because they think they're taking the cue from the Torah that seems to highlight the fact that this is a generation of miserable complainers, right? It really is. It's, the first they complain, we're not getting enough barbecue, right? We're not getting, we don't get enough barbecue, and we're missing the cucumbers and the watermelon. A very interesting menu that they were complaining that they weren't getting, that they had in Egypt and they're not getting here, whatever it is. And we got that. And God says, I'm going to give you enough barbecue that's going to be coming out of your nose. Quite literally how God says, right? Then they're complaining, we want, the fruits of Israel are too big. We want to stay in the desert. We want to stay in the desert. Fine, you're going to stay in the desert. No, we really want to go in. We want to go in. We want to go in. You can't go in. You've missed your chance. No, we want to go in. And then it's Moshe, you're not a good leader. And then you're turning around and you're like, right? And so you walk away. You say, okay, this must have been a generation that God basically, and God turns around and says, this whole generation will fade away in the desert, and they will not be the generation to go into the land of Israel. Sorry, you lost that chance, which again means that you would think what we're saying is that you are a generation relegated to the dustbin of history. We wash our hands of you, and we'd rather focus on better people, right? That's what you would assume is being said here. Except that this is the most famous generation of the Jewish people in history. This is the generation we read about year after year after year after year, year in, year out. The past 3,335 times we've been reading about this one generation again and again and again. And we are not afraid. You see, here's the way the Torah works. The Torah is not a gossip column. The Torah is sharing with us their mistakes, not to beat up on them, but so that we learn. And this is instructional. The Torah also shares their triumphs and the fact that they don't make the same mistake twice. They learn from their mistakes, which gives them the capacity to make other mistakes. But that's the way life is. That's the way it goes. And I said often, when you reflect back right now, hopefully, we all can ride a two-wheeler pretty competently. If I had to, maybe we don't do it regularly. Maybe some of us do it regularly. But if I had to go and take the family on a vacation to San Francisco, we decided, hey, let's all go on bikes and ride around the city. I will not be afraid to rent a two-wheeler and get onto that bike. I don't think I would make it around as much as I would like to on the bike before I need to take a couple breaks along the way. But that's a different discussion. But the riding itself of the bike, I can do, right? Pretty confident, feel pretty confident. The fact, the rule is apparently that you never forget how to ride a bike, right? We've all heard that rule, right? So now I'm in the position where I can look back at my 6-year-old self that was wobbling and falling and scraping knees as learning and say, what a loser, right? Couldn't figure out how to ride a two-wheeler. I'm so good at it now. What a loser I was when I was a 6-year-old. And of course not. Of course not. How brave and how much was that a period of growth in my life that over the span of however it took, I went and I didn't know how to do something. And I got it onto it and I fell and it hurt and it was painful. And I got back on and I learned from my mistakes and slowly but surely grew to the period where I was able to be a competent two-wheel bike rider. And what is the key to riding a two-wheeler? 2 things, which is why I chose this particular metaphor. A, you got to keep forward momentum. You cannot stop and expect to stay up, right? Unless you're a circus clown who know how to do those kind of tricks. The rest of us need to be moving forward in order to keep from falling down. And number 2, obviously, the key aspect of riding a two-wheeler is the balance. That's a skill. It's an important skill. It's a skill that doesn't come automatically. You have to learn it. And it's going to come with scrapes and bumps and bruises along the way. That's the reason the Torah is hyper-focused on these 40 years. Because here the Jewish people are learning how to ride their two-wheel, how to ride their bike, how to maintain that balance between being physical and spiritual. Being something that the world has up until this point not seen. Angels exist in heaven, animals exist on earth, and the human being is meant to be something unique and different than them both.
Well, they haven't done well.
To be a being of heaven here on earth, to being a being of earth with a soul from heaven. And therefore, to be a partner with God in this enterprise known as creation. Not to be a follower, and not to be an independent contractor, which is also very important to understand, but to be a partner with God in creation. And so we highlight every instructional moment, every time that the Jewish people went this way or that way, heard a message but overcompensated, calibrated and then recalibrated, because although we'd like to think with a certain cynical edge that what were they thinking? How could they have made those mistakes? Don't they see the obvious? You mean that which has become obvious after 3,000 years of hindsight? And that we are honestly still struggling with on a daily basis in our own lives? So let's cut them a little bit of slack here. Or more importantly, let's pay good attention to the lessons that they went through and that we go through. Now, in this week's Parsha, there is so much. Parshat Chukat, if you ask me which Parsha is probably the Parsha most packed with events, whereas like by the time you process this, halfway through one aliyah or events and ideas, you're hit with another one. It's non-stop. This week's Torah portion is non-stop. First, it starts off with the paraduma with the red heifer. Such a unique conversation, such a unique mitzvah. The Torah calls this the chok of the entire Torah, right? That itself could spend an entire year studying, right? On the paraduma and everything that there is in this process, including the idea of why does the Torah call this the chok, not just a chok, but the chok of the Torah.
I think
Right.
it's the most inscrutable to us, isn't it?
So let's spend a minute on this, okay? Before we move to in a sense something else worth unpacking in this parsha. But first, actually, before we even do that, so we have the paradum, okay? From there, we flow into the passing of Miriam, and what happens at the moment of the passing of Miriam? The well dries up.
With the water?
Yeah, the well dries up. The rock that was providing water stops providing water. This relatively innocuous moment where Moshe has to become a plumber ends up becoming a catastrophic moment in Moshe's life. Why?
Because he hits it.
Because Hashem says, talk to the rock. Moshe hits the rock. First of all, what's that all about? And his hitting of an inanimate object costs him his life's greatest dream. Okay? Apparently, hitting an inanimate object is a terrible, horrible thing, which I would then say somebody's got to warn all the baseball players and all the golf players, right? It's a rock. He didn't talk to it, he hit it. And that should cost him his ability to go into the land of Israel?
Because he didn't
Hold that
he didn't take the instruction.
Well,
It's not-
okay.
That's not helpful. That's so unhelpful to me. Here he is in mourning. And all right, so he didn't rip his clothes. He hit a rock instead. He's letting out his emotions on the death of his sister, who was his
Good.
confidant.
Okay, so you're actually you're with me, right? We're let's get on. Let's be advocates for Moshe here. I'll take it a step further. Is this the first time he hit the rock?
No.
No. 40 years ago, Moshe hit the rock, and guess what? God gave him an
We got
attaboy,
water.
right?
Ah,
Right?
What? I did the same thing I did last time. Okay, so that's in this week's parsha. The consequence of it is also in this week's parsha. That okay. So two major things to talk about, right? We're not done yet. Then there's a whole story of them coming and having the first face-off with the nations that are standing in the way of them entering the land of Canaan. They meet up for the first time as a nation with the Edomites, with Edom, with their cousins, right? The children of Esau, right? A little showdown. They say, we just want to pass through, right? In fact, they say, listen, we have plenty of food and drink, but we will do that. We will patronize, right, all the tourist shops along the way, right? And we will pay the exorbitant prices for your sandwiches and for your drinks and for your knickknacks. Just like every tourist, nothing's changed in 3,500 years of human nature. We will pay all the extra price to do it just grant us a free passage. In fact, right over here, a certain well-known road in Brooklyn gets its name. Anybody know? They say this is how you know the Jews always belong to Brooklyn. Because they say, just let us pass through on Derech HaMelech, King's Highway.
Oh, King's Highway.
Just give us just we want to just use the route. GPS is telling us to get onto King's Highway, get off at exit 35 by Bethlehem, and we're good, right? No, Edom stops them. That's another event in this week's parsha. We're not done yet. Then they come on their detour. They come to Hor Hahar, the mountain of the mountains. What happens at this place?
Aaron dies.
Aaron passes away. And this incredibly dramatic moment of the passing of Aaron, who is beloved by the people, the mourning that they have for him, the incredibly spiritual way in which he passes is discussed in this parsha, so much so that it moves Moshe to say, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want to pass like my brother Aaron. Well, we'll talk about that also a little bit. But there's also a consequence for Aaron passing. What's the consequence for Aaron's passing?
The priesthood?
For a brief moment, the clouds of glory dissipate.
Oh, sorry.
Right? So you had the water of the rock dry up with Miriam's passing. You have the clouds of glory dissipate with Aaron's passing, and a group of opportunistic Canaanites see an opportunity, but they're the Canaanites from the town of Arad, or by the way, anybody know what is currently who are the majority population in the city of Arad in Israel today? Gerer Hasidim. Go figure. Anyway, out in the south, down in Israel over there, Arad is just full of Gerer Hasidim. But that's its own conversation that we can figure out. But it says the king of Canaan or the Canaanite, the king of Arad, which commentaries say these were not Canaanites; these were actually Amalekites, because the Canaanites region was nowhere near Arad, but this was whatever it is, but they came disguised as Canaanites, whatever it is. But they see an opportunity to once again take a second bite at the apple, attack the Jewish people while their spiritual walls are down. They do. They capture. They take a hostage. Fortunately, something we know a little bit about right now, right? And then the Jewish people fight back, and they fight back hard. Maybe, as we said, also something to consider. But either way, that is in this week's parsha. That is followed by the fact that the Jewish people now have to make a U-turn, to make a detour around the entire land of Edom, because God does not allow them to just traverse, to do war with Edom. Once Edom says you're not allowed in, God says, okay, you're not going through, you have to go around. It says, because there will be the time that you will take on Edom. When? When will you take on Esav, Seir, Edom? When is that showdown? When is that pay-per-view heavyweight championship scheduled for?
You're in the land.
Mashiach.
No.
V'alu Moshiim b'Har Tzion l'shpot et harisav. V'haytala Hashem hamlucha. That in a sense is the great epic showdown. That is in a sense the final epic battle that will usher in the times of Mashiach, because to a certain degree that represents the Jewish people on the one side, the opposition on the other, and then V'haytala Hashem hamlucha. But so God says this is. Skirmishes all the time in between, but the great epic showdown and conquering of Esav will only happen with the coming of Mashiach. The bottom line is they have to turn their backs towards Israel and head into the desert away as they're detouring around, which obviously anybody's ever had to take a detour, right? And you see, I'm just going to get right over there. It's right there. I'm looking at them. No, get back on the. It's very, very frustrating. The Jewish people are very frustrated. They're starting complaining to Moshe again. They're saying we're tired of all the of all this manna falling from heaven. We're done with all this already. We're done. We're sick and tired of this. And a whole bunch of snakes, right? And as God sends a whole bunch of snakes, right? Plague of snakes. And now the people are complaining because they're dying. And they say, Moshe, we're dying. What do we do? So Moshe turns to God and says, what am I supposed to do? And what does God tell him?
Put a snake on top of you.
Create the first caduceus, right? That snake on the staff thing,
Right.
the copper snake on the staff that becomes the symbol of the medicine throughout history. People will see it and they will be healed, right? And obviously the commentaries say they're not really looking at the snake on the staff, but their eyes are turned heavenward, right? And to remind themselves where does all blessing come from, etc., etc. So that's in this week's parsha, right? By the way, we're still not anywhere near done this parsha in terms of events that are occurring over here. Okay? Then they go and they are journeying their way in the in the detour, and they are passing in a very steep valley between two mountains. And they pass through it hunky-dory, no problems, right? The front page of the paper was, nothing new happened here. It was a regular day of journeying. And that was a remarkable headline. Why? Because there was an ambush waiting for the Jewish people on those two mountains. So what happened? God made a miracle unbeknownst to the people and slammed those two mountains together, which was particularly unpleasant for all those camped in the mountains for the ambush. They all perished in that cataclysmic event, and the Jewish people would not have known that anything was waiting for them or anything had happened. A great miracle and the salvation had occurred had it not been for what? For the newly minted or the newly reflowing be'er, the well, which meandered its way through all the nooks and crannies of this mountain and brought out the lifeless bodies of the would-be ambushers. At which point the Jewish people saw this and they sang a ode to the be'er.
Right.
They sang one of the three songs of the Torah is in this week's parsha. You know, the famous one is the Az Yashir, the Song of the Sea. Then there's the Song of Moshe, the Ha'azinu. And the third one is only 2 verses long, and it is in this week's Torah parsha, Az Yashir. It says Az Yashir, just like the Az Yashir Moshe, which is the Song of the Sea. Li Be'er, a song an ode to the well. To the wellspring. And so that's in this week's parsha as well. We're not done yet. Then we have in this week's parsha the showdown with the 2 great sentinels that are guarding the entrance into the land of Canaan. 2 great kings that are the most formidable individuals on the planet. As individuals, there are not 2 more formidable individuals on the planet. Anybody know their names?
Sichon and Og?
Very good. Sichon and Og. Sichon, the king of the Amorites. Og, the king of the Bashanites. Og is a very, very old man. How old is Og at this point? He was the one who hung on to the ark
From Noah.
to save himself.
Right.
So this guy's got a good grip, right? I mean, he held on for a year on the outside of the ark, survived that, which is why his first title was the Palit, the survivor. When he came by to tell Abraham, because he coveted Sarai, he wanted Avram's wife, and he he's the one who told Abraham that Lot, his nephew, had been captured, and he is honor bound. Abraham is honor bound to wage war against 4 kings that just beat up 5 kings, and he was sure that while Abraham would have to commit to this because he would be honor bound, there's no way that he would survive, and the easy way to get rid of Abraham and get Sarai, and he's there referred to as Hapalit, the survivor, because that's what he was. He was a well-known survivor, the famous survivor from the cataclysmic event of the flood. So this is a fellow who keeps popping up. At a certain point, obviously, this kind of guy with that kind of notoriety, that kind of, and who was considered, he was a giant, a true giant. Moshe, who was no spring chicken himself. The commentaries say that Moshe stood 15 amot, 30 feet. Some commentaries say he stood 30 feet tall himself. But Moshe came up to Og's ankles. Okay, I mean, again, now whether these are all literal things, but Og is a giant, and Sichon also. And this kind of goes again to what we were talking about earlier, that the Jewish people are not their concern. When we talked about when the spies came with their negative report, we're not talking about a people that are really concerned over kind of physical statistics, as it were, of height and strength and whatever it is. The reason they were afraid to go into the land of Israel was a far more kind of a spiritual fear that they had about taking on the worldliness, becoming farmers, when up until this point they were yeshiva bachrim. I mean, the bottom line is, as we said, they come up against Og and Sichon, and they just bulldoze their way through these 2 guys and their nations. And the Torah goes out of its way to talk about how powerful Og and Sichon are, how they bulldozed the nations that came before them, how the Amorites were not even indigenous to that region, but they came through, they conquered in very quick order the nations that were indigenous, and then here come the Jewish people, and steamroll right over Sichon and Og, and talk about how they take their land, which is a particularly fertile piece of property right on the east bank of the Jordan River, right? Which, entices 2.5 tribes to say, what?
We want to stay there.
This is good. We're good, Moshe. Can we have this, right? Ruvain, Gad, and half of Menashe choose to stay there, but they make a covenant with Moshe that they will go in and fight for the rest of the land. In fact, they will be the vanguard. They will be the first. They'll be the front lines of the battles to conquer the land of Canaan, but they would like to settle themselves on this side of the Jordan. Bottom line is, all this is in one parsha. All of this is in one parsha, Parshat Chukat. So much. Each one of these things is something that you could really spend a significant amount of time talking about. One of the 3 songs of the entire Torah: the passing of Miriam, the passing of Aaron, the great downfall of Moshe when he hits the rock instead of talking to it, the turning aside from Edom, the facing off with Sichon and Og. Each one of these is like, where do you even start? What do you even pick? This is like the box of chocolates, and it's very intimidating, right? You're the first one that has to pick, right? We're passing around the box of chocolates. Okay, here, you pick first. Yeah, right. Go. What do you want to talk about, right? So, and that introduction, by the way, has taken up 3/4 of our time and has left us 15 minutes to talk. So
what do you want to talk about?
Right. Well, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? I was like, what do you want to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do today? So, right. And that, by the way, when that conversation usually happens in our family, we end up doing nothing, and we each blame each other. Let's. What I do think it's worth talking about is to talk about what has become classically the 3 elements, the 3 great sustaining miracles of the Jewish people as they were going through the desert, who they were in the merit of, and why. if anybody had to say, what are the three greatest necessities of any individual, indeed any creature, period? What are the three things that you cannot live without? Not
Air,
including air,
air,
because
water,
air
and
is
air.
ubiquitous.
No,
So-
nowhere.
Food, shelter, water.
Food, water, shelter, right? There it is. Food, water, shelter. Food, water, and shelter, God provided for them as they were going through the desert in a miraculous way. These were the three most manifest miracles in their lives every single day. They woke up and they experienced these miracles in a blatantly divine manner. Almost Hashem was making a point with these things.
And I think that's what my objection is to your cycling metaphor. For me, although I agree with every reason you gave, it's just for me, the metaphor is gestation. It's not cycling. I look at the baby in the room and I can't help it.
You're saying that gestation rather than, in a sense, learning how to ride a two-wheeler. I think there's truth to that. I think we have to understand that, every metaphor is going to be inherently flawed because it's going to capture something and something else is going to capture. More than gestation, I would say I would make an argument because they were conscious of the fact that they were learning and they were going through a process of assimilating information and instruction at the time, which is why they were course correcting because they were trying to, which is why I use the metaphor of the two-wheeler, because there's that balancing and overbalancing, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I will give you the gestation for kind of, as you said, what we're kind of going to be talking about here. But I would argue perhaps to a certain degree that it is still fair to say that this is kind of on-the-job training, or the two-wheeler rather, learning the two-wheeler, because whose hand is always on the back of the two-wheeler in the beginning as you're trying to learn, right? Whoever is that parental figure, right, keeping you aloft. So you're not just purely on your own, but you're getting very much and that hand back there is so crucial, right? It's always that moment, that moment that first as a kid and as a parent, that's the beautiful moments, right? I've got you. I'm not going to let go. I'm not letting go. No, just keep pedaling. Look forward. And then there's that time where you feel like as a parent, you let go, right? And they're not aware that they're doing it. They still think they got the hand on the back. And then they turn around and you're able to turn with them with the triumph and say, you just did that last bit without right? That moment, you did it. You did it on your own. You thought you had my help, but you kind of did it, right? But either way, in the beginning, while the people are going, it's not just that they're receiving sustenance. They are receiving blatant sustenance and assistance from God in such a clear and obvious way that they have no choice but to acknowledge it. The manna is falling from heaven. Water is pouring from a rock. Now, by the way, there's ways that God could provide, and it seemed a lot more natural, right? Where it could be all of a sudden oases are springing up that just, wouldn't you believe it? The Sinai Desert is full of oases, right? Little they know that there happened to be yesterday this oasis didn't exist and God sprung this oasis into existence. But as far as the people are concerned, we just got lucky. We bumped into another oasis. Again, it would have been the hand of God, but it would have been in a far less blatant way. Or with the rivers, et cetera, or this, or none of the animals would just be. This must be a really friendly desert. No snakes or scorpions are attacking, and whatever it is, no people are. God could have provided the shelter, could have provided the food, could have provided the water in a way that wasn't in your face miracles every single day. God specifically did it in a way where it was so clear and obvious because this is part of the training process. Why is this part of the training process? 1 minute. We'll get to that in a second. But because first we have to remind ourselves
Okay.
the three and the merit of which of the three. The well is literally called the well
Miriam.
of
Miriam.
Miriam. So the water, the sustaining miracle of water was in the merit of Miriam. The sustaining miracle of the shelter was in the merit of Aaron. When he passed, the clouds dissipated. So the
Oh,
clouds of glory
being
were
sheltered.
in
Got
the
it.
merit of Aaron. The well is in the merit of Miriam. And the manna was in the merit of Moshe. When Moshe passes away, all three stop. But because they returned, it says in the commentary say that very clearly that this was in the merit of Miriam, this was in the merit of Aaron, and then it was Moshe's task to bring those back in his own merit, as it were, which is why it was his job to reactivate the water from the rock that ended so catastrophically with him hitting it instead of talking. Okay. So let's analyze this. Firstly, why such blatant and obvious miracles? As God is, sometimes when we're not necessarily at our best, right? And we're really in the need of some validation and acknowledgement, we give something to somebody, but we make sure they know where they got it from, right? Yeah. We make sure, and if it seems to be that we dropped it off or whatever it is, and they may not have, like, so did you get that thing that I left you? I just wanted to make sure that you got it from me. Yeah, and I'm obviously being a little bit, I'm embellishing.
No,
But to a
that's the
certain
way it
degree,
goes.
no, but to a certain degree, obviously, look, at the end of the day, if we put ourselves out there to provide something for somebody, being acknowledged for it does hurt. But we'd like to think that God is a little bit bigger than that. Okay, is it very important for God that the people should never forget that He is the one providing them this bread from the sky and this water from a rock, that He has to do it in such this blatantly obvious way that don't you dare ever forget that I'm the one who gave this to you.
Well, if it's a
And the answer is
partnership,
Yes.
yes. Yes, it is always important for us to remember. Absolutely, it is key for us to remember. In fact, by the way, the Torah goes out of its way, for example, to say about the man, right? That if you try to exert any control over it whatsoever,
Right.
you
It
will
would go
fail.
rotten.
You will fail. You will always remember that it is me providing. If you try to even stash away some for tomorrow, guess what's going to happen to that stash?
Right. It's going to go rotten.
Because you will wake up every day knowing that the only way you are eating today is because I am providing it. Same as with the water, same as with the clouds of glory. Your shelter, that's me, baby. Your water, that's me. Your food is me. Why? Again, is God that petty? No, it has nothing to
It's
do with the
not
pettiness.
petty.
It's because you always have to acknowledge who your silent partner is. Because God says the way it's going to work is I am going to have to remain silent, because the bigger of a presence I am, the smaller of a presence you are. And I need you to be a big presence, God says. I need you. The more I impose my presence, the more you are necessarily in the periphery. Because God is infinite. God is infinite. God's presence is the only real presence. So the more you feel God's presence by default, the less of a presence you are. And God says, I don't want it that way. I want you to rise to your moment. I want you to rise to the occasion. I want you to play a role here. So I am going to fade into the background called nature. And it's going to be up to you to remember that when you're pulling bread out of the ground, It's going to be the exact same thing as bread falling from the sky. It is still entirely me. So you never forget. I'm training you 40 years into burning into your psyche that every day your sustenance is coming from who?
God.
From God. So that when later you're farming and you're pulling bread out of the earth,
But
it's
that's
still
my story I always tell. We're not pulling bread from the earth. We're pulling wheat from the earth, and we have to partner with God to make the bread.
right. But more importantly, we turn around and after we're the ones, right? This is what you're saying, Jerry, right? After we're the ones who schwitz and toil and put the seeds in the ground, and then schwitz in the first schwitz and toil to break the ground, right? To till the earth, then schwitz and toil to drop the seeds into the earth, then schwitz and toil to protect the earth, then schwitz and toil to water it, right? With if it is not enough rain in the time, schwitz and toil to nurture the young shoots, schwitz and toil to harvest it, schwitz and toil to crush it into grain, schwitz and toil to take that grain and draw the water from the well and mix it with the flour and then bake it, etc., etc. We then pick up that piece of bread that we work so hard to create, and the first words out of our mouth are,
Thank you, God.
"Thank you, God, for giving me bread from the earth."
Silent but not anonymous.
Right. And importantly, God, you will remain silent, but we will not let you remain silent.
Mhm.
We will be the ones who declare it. And that is why it's a very strange bracha. Baruch atah Hashem hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Are you walking? Anybody? I haven't had it that I'm walking down the street and bread loaves are popping out of the earth. I would love that. If a French bread just came popping out of from the
I'll take
nearest construction
focaccia.
site, I would that would be great, right? So lechem is not popping out of the earth, right? As we said, we just use schwitz and do toil now to do it. But it's a strange bracha to make. You know why? Because it's a variation of the very first bracha we ever made on bread. You know what the very first bracha we ever made on bread was? The bracha we made on man.
Matzah.
What was the bracha you made on man?
Man, not matzah.
Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim.
Okay.
Mm.
Now you know. Now you understand the script of our blessing. Because for 40 years, we were making a bracha every time you picked up the man. And you were about to eat it. You said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. And when we crossed into the land of Israel, and we schwitzed, and we toiled, and we did
you guys
our
do
part.
like this with your hands when you say the bracha of the bread?
Like that? No, no, I was, well, yes. You, let me take that back. Yes. In other words, you hold the bread right on Shabbat specifically, right?
Right? But like,
Right. You have to actually raise up the bread. You know that when you make the
Right.
hamotzi, because again, this is a partnership. Because here's something else very important. It was actually today's Hayom Yom. You know, there's always an excerpt of talk of the Rebbe, of a thought for the day. Thought for the day was a certain chassid of the Alter Rebbe that came to the Alter Rebbe, a very prestigious chassid, and came to the Alter Rebbe for a private audience, just an update, spiritual, material, sharing where he's holding in life, spiritually, materially, etc. And the Alter Rebbe asked him, "What's this? So, how are things going?" And he says, "Miserable." I'm paraphrasing. It just says that he basically told the Alter Rebbe that he lost everything. The Alter Rebbe tells him as follows: you're in a partnership with God. God has to provide you everything you need, so that you can then turn around and provide God everything He needs. There is Chassidus sums it up in one line. God makes something from nothing, or the whole world has got something from nothing, and our role is to take that something and revert it back to nothing. What does that mean? Obviously, the nothing that we are talking about when we say something from nothing is that nothing in the type of status that it currently is in, right? It wasn't, there was nothing. There was no sun, there was no moon, there was nothing. What there was pure godliness. Utter and pure and complete God, wall to wall. It was all godliness. It was all pure God. Now God has gone through a process, unveiling himself, etc., where, as we talked about, now I see books and I see this, and all this is part of God's creation from something to nothing. Now, what is the true reality about all these things? Are they really a something that stands apart and alone and distinct and independent from God?
No.
No, there is nothing independent from God. So the truth about this book is that what, or this piece of bread, or this anything, is that it really is nothing distinct and separate from God. Now, who's going to remind the world that it is that? Who's going to teach this world that they do not stand separate and apart? You are not a independent or distinct example. You're part of the beautiful fabric of godliness.
Jews.
That's our role. Our role is to inform the world of its true nature. And that's the partnership. The partnership is, we say, God, give us the material and we will convert it into the spiritual. We are give us the mundane and we will make it holy. Give us the raw material and we will refine it. Give us the lechem min haaretz and we will in fact make a blessing and make it holy and raise it up. It may have started on earth, but it will rise all the way up to heaven, because that's in fact what we do. We take the energy that we get from this piece of bread and we go do something lofty and spiritual and meaningful and raise this bread as an offering to heaven. How do we know that this doesn't just apply to the offerings that were brought onto the altar and are to my holy moments on Shabbos? How do we know this applies to my lunch meal? Do you know what you're meant to put on every single piece of bread you eat? What are you supposed to dip the bread into every single time you eat bread, whether it is on Shabbat or whether it is on a Tuesday?
Salt?
Yeah, salt. That is not just for Shabbos.
Oh,
You're meant to dip your bread into salt every meal. Now, why are you dipping bread into salt, period?
So that your high blood pressure.
Reminiscent of the offerings in the temple, no offering was brought on the temple without salt. So what are you saying when you are taking your cream cheese sandwich and dipping it into salt?
But why? Why salt?
that's what he's asking.
No. In other words, why did Hashem choose that every offering should be accompanied with salt? The primary reason is because salt represents the concept of drawing out a potential of something. Salt on its own is very cheap and doesn't taste great. But the ability of salt to draw out the potential of something, right? A pinch of salt on a dish is not the salt that's making the taste. It's the dish, it's the meat or whatever it is that you're pulling up. But what has the power to draw out the full, robust flavor of this particular thing, to draw out its unlock its potential, is the spice. And the most powerful of spices is salt. And that's what it says. Hashem says, I want you to bring this to me in its fullest potential. I want you to go and not just bring it, but bring it don't take the raw material that I gave you and say, here it is back, right? Enhance it, refine it, draw out its potential, and then bring it back to me in its enhanced and refined way. So that's what salt is. But the idea that we take that we don't just do this to the offerings in the temple, but every single time we eat bread, we are meant to be dipping it in salt, is because we are reminding ourselves that really even our most mundane tasks carry this sense of purpose and meaning. That when Hashem is giving us the blessings, our material blessings in life, it's not just a kindness, it is a investment. It's a hashka'ah. God is investing in his partner. And that's in a very real way the attitude we have to have. And how did God train us into this mindset? That for 40 years straight, it was clear, without a question, that what I have on my plate has been served up on a silver platter from my none too silent partner known as God. So that when I enter into the land of Israel, and Moshe warns about this. This is the entire theme of the Ha'azinu, right, of Shirat Moshe, is you're going to be facing a great challenge. You're going to go into the land of Canaan, and the paradigm is going to change. Heretofore, it was blatant and obvious that it was my hand on the back of your bike.
Mm.
It was blatant and obvious, as Paula said, that in the gestation period, I am through the umbilical cord providing you all of your necessities, and you're surrounded by a womb, and therefore the address of your existence is me. But you're going to cross into the land of Canaan, and you're going to work the land, and it's going to produce for you. And Shamanta Avita Kasita, you're going to start to become fat with your own ego. And you're going to see Kochi v'otzam yadi asaliyat hachayil hazeh. It's my own greatness and my own success, my own amazing talents and skills that has made for me this. And you can never forget, right? V'zacharta et Hashem ki hu hanoten lecha koach lasot chayil. You're going to have to always remember that it is Hashem who's providing, and not simply because He wants the acknowledgement, but because He wants you to remember why He's providing, because you're a partner. He's investing in you. He has great expectations for you. So to sit there and just be the end user is not your role. You are not the end user. You are the partner as the provider. You're on the provider end of things, not on the consumer end of things. So when this resource is being passed to you, right? You're not the one who's supposed to, right? You get that, the high school kid who gets the job in the restaurant, right? Right? It's like, here, take, get served up this delicious plate, right? Oh, thank you so much. You start eating. You said, no, fool, you're the waiter. Go bring it to that person, right? You're not meant to be the end user. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to sit there and not eat whatever it is. No, but we understand the deeper point of the metaphor. The 40 years in the desert, where Hashem ingrained into our very psyche, that everything that is provided to you, that everything that you have, rather, is provided to you by God, ingrains key aspects of our nature. The constant sense of gratitude. 100 brachas a day. Anything that you have, you're not entitled to. You didn't make happen for yourself. It all comes from Hashem. Say a bracha and realize that. Even if you're the one who schwitzed and toiled to bring this bread to the table, first words out of your mouth are Baruch Atah Hashem, Amotzi Lechem, this whole completed bread. You're the one who produced this from the earth, not me. And it's reminiscent of the bread that literally fell out of the sky. And the water that I have reminds me of the water that came from the rock, that there was no questions asked, that this was a miracle that was from God. And the shelter that we enjoy, and the protections we enjoy, it's not thanks to Bibi Netanyahu, and it's not thanks to our alliance with America, and it's not thanks to the IDF, etc. It is thanks to God, who uses all these tools. Right? B'shem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach. And that's the partnership aspect. And that brings us to the next point, that not only do I have to be grateful to God, humble, etc., but then I have to ask myself the obvious question, why? Why has God given me this? What am I meant to do with it? And it's those kind of people that are incredibly generous with their time. They're generous with their resources. They're sharing type of people. They're generous type of people, because they have that sense immediately that I am not meant to be the end user of my own life. That's the point of the of providing in such a blatantly divine way. It's because eventually you will move past this training period, and you will move into the place where I will kind of back away, and you will be the one, as they say in Yiddish, steering the ship, captaining your little boat. Right? Or you seemingly captaining your boat. Which is the way I want it, says God. I want you to take charge, etc. I want you to be a robust partner, making decisions, etc., etc. So I will necessarily take my blatant presence and move it into the background. But Zeitnish cannot. Don't be a fool. And remember that nothing really has changed. When the bread was falling out of heaven, it was entirely me. When the bread is coming out of the earth, it's still entirely me. All right?
Yep,
Yeah.
very good.
Thank you very much. It was very full of,
Thank you, Rabbi.
meaningful insights. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Shalom.
As long as everybody have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat.
You too,
Um,
Rabbi.
And after in retrospect, I guess whatever it is, dedicate What's her name? Noah, you said, right?
No.
Noah.
Noah,
Noah, did you enjoy the Shir Torah?
she
No.
paid attention.
It was
I'm going to
very
quiz you later. I'm going to do having a quiz. We're going to give you a quiz. We expect you to be able to repeat verbatim everything you heard. Okay. Oh, there you go. All right. Sure. She's not intimidated.
Nope. She's bold.
Yes.
I envy her that.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. But the class dedicated to the yard sites for particularly meaningful this past week. Obviously, the Rebbe, which was 2 days ago, and the third of Tammuz. It's the father, in a sense, the father figure for our entire generation. And the mother figure, at least for the Gazinski family in the Bethesda community, 2 days before that, on the 1st of Tammuz, my mother's Yotzei Chayaslat Bas Rav Yeshua, that may this stand be in merit for her Aliyat Hanashama, and may in general we continue to do things for those that we love, for those that have put us in the position. Again, the same thing about being grateful for the fact of all those who provided us what we needed to be where we're at. Never forget that. Never lose sight. And we repay with tremendous dividends all their investment in us.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. You're right.
All right.
Shabbat
Thank you.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Give a kiss to Noah.
One last bye.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. All right.
She's
Really?
the star.
Azizkeit. Okay. She's the official mascot of this class from now
Oh.
on.